Oh, what a great way to start the day. In an effort here, they're getting you mind ready to understand where you personally are today, personally and financially. I'm going to kick off the morning and let you guys know where the market is today and some trends that we certainly expect to be seeing in the future that will help you along the way in your strategic planning on when it's time for you to exit, and hopefully us giving you information to arm you so that you can make that decision in a timely manner for you and your family. So we like to start off, well, a little bit about myself actually. I graduated VMI, rival of the Citadel, in 2008, and have spent the entirety of my career in the business side of healthcare, with the first half of it being on the hospital and ambulatory surgery center side, and the latter half of my career being in the dental space. Spans a myriad of management consulting duties, business development duties, and mergers and acquisitions. So I'm really excited today to talk and meld those experiences together and pull a lot of parallels that I saw and during my time in healthcare that are beginning to take shape in the dental community here that will help you all, maybe those that have a long runway before considering an exit, taking this information and building a business in the image of where dentistry is going to be when it is time for you to exit, and reassure those of you that are perhaps not in the future model of dentistry today that you don't necessarily have to be there in order to benefit and maximize the valuation of your business when and if it's time to exit. So this is a slide that TUSK has been keeping track of for a very long time. It's certainly an eyesore, so I'll orient everybody in the audience to it. On the left side, you've got the top 10 DSOs in the country by location. So that's number of location count. This is nothing to do with revenue, nothing to do with EBITDA. And this is taking their growth from 2011 all the way to 2022. Thank you, Yazin, for updating 2022 for us at TUSK. So this is information that we gather internally and have been tracking so that we can take signals that are coming from the market and ultimately impart that to our clients. So on the right here, you've got the total growth from 2011 to 2022 for each of these groups. At the very bottom, you've got 900% from North American Dental Group. Now, if you look at the far left, they started with 25 locations in 2011 and then experienced the vast majority of their growth in the early years and kind of stagnated here. And then moving to the top, you've got Heartland Dental that has grown 440% from that time period. Keep in mind that 9 out of 10 of these groups were formed well before 2011. So these are the early movers in the DSO space, and these are the groups that we research intensely to take signals from to identify where the new groups that are coming to market are ultimately going to go. Because you can follow Heartland's track record and trajectory and what their strategic initiatives were along the way, and we can help identify those same trends with some of these younger DSOs, and as such frame our clients' businesses in a certain light with certain buyers, given all the history that exists. This is a really important number, and this is a great signal for the industry. Compound annual growth rate, that is the year-over-year growth from 2011 to 2022 that these businesses were able to sustain. So you're looking at anywhere between 14 and 17% from businesses that are 15 to 20 years old. That's a great signal. Private equity groups are touting 15 to 20% returns to their limited partners when they take money to invest into a private equity fund to ultimately go out and execute a business plan. So if these businesses that are 20 years old are able to generate these meaningful returns, that's a great signal for the economy, for the industry of dentistry, and means that there's a good runway still left here. A really interesting one is MB2. They didn't even exist in 2011. So they are a new adopter, but they've gone from 0 businesses in 2011 to 506 businesses as of the end of 2022, and are the 5th largest DSO in the country. If you look at their compound annual growth rate, it's from 17 to 22. That's 44%. So Heartland's early years was probably 44% as well. So they're ultimately going to plateau because it's going to get harder and harder for them to double or triple in size over the same amount of time. So you will not continue to see 44% compound annual growth rate. These groups get so big that it's really hard to grow 15, 20% every year. And the total growth over that time period, 2017 to 22, is 510%. So this is what's going on in the top of the market. These are great trends for the industry. But I do think it's important to note that most of these are GP-only DSOs. And if you look at the way that healthcare began to consolidate, it was at the internal medicine or general practice level, and then it moved on and then morphed into this new multi-specialty, super synergized world that is today. So I have the great pleasure of going into my sort of experience and bringing out and drawing those parallels for you today. We get asked the question a lot, where is dentistry today with respect to consolidation? I'm really glad Brian Caleo used the numbers that he used, because those are actually the numbers that I was going to use today. So he had mentioned that it's approximately 35% consolidated, with as much as, maybe it'll get to 70, maybe it'll get to 80% in totality. So this is a great graphic that we were able to obtain as well. So this states that if you're going to use a baseball analogy, we're somewhere between the fourth and the sixth, call it the fifth inning of the game with respect to consolidation. Now, we know that it's not going to get 100% consolidated. We at TUSK believe that the idea of the solo practicing business that has created a lifestyle business that creates great wealth and income for that individual doctor or group of doctors, but might not be the right fit for the DSO space, and those will continue to operate into perpetuity. Additionally, we feel that there are always going to be those entrepreneurial-minded folks that want to go out and build something above and beyond, the solo practice, and those people will continue to do that. And then we also know that there are some people that have exited, taken their lumps, taken their learnings, and want to go out there and try it again. So we think that at the end of this, game, the ninth inning, it will only get to 70 to 80% consolidation. Healthcare consolidated much deeper than that, but that was largely because of the payer systems, the private and the pay influence that exists in the healthcare space. It doesn't really exist in the dental space, so it probably won't get as consolidated. But these are this is a good way to break down the life cycle of consolidation. So in the early innings, 1 through 3 is the land grab stage. 8 out of the 10 DSOs that were on that previous page were all growth-minded businesses through mergers and acquisitions. 2 of them were de novo-based strategies, and de novo means start from scratch. So Aspen and Pacific were not in the acquisition game. They were in the de novo. They built from scratch. They got that muscle early on, and they continue to execute with that. There have been some strategic acquisitions that they've made deep into their life, but that wasn't until year 15 for Aspen, and maybe even further along for Pacific. So what we have on the left side are clinical efficiencies, back office capabilities, scale, develop. So these are all things that we can score and determine where we are in that respective place. So clinical efficiency, back office capabilities, these are really what early DSOs were promising. Hey, we will put the clinician first, we will take administrative things off of your plate, and we will let you maximize all the revenue that you can generate with your 2 hands, because that's what you're good at. And that was the target profile that they wanted for each and every one of the doctors that they brought on. They were not really worried about specialty, as you saw on the previous slide. They were not really concerned about customer or patient experience. They were just worried about getting doctors happy and maximizing their capabilities and monetizing that business through EBITDA arbitrage. Now you've got where we are today, where clinical efficacy or efficiency, is virtually table stakes. Back office capabilities, you've got DSOs that have really built this muscle, really do add significant value and take administrative burdens off of the practices. And they've even got boots on the ground, regional resources to rotate through the businesses in which they own. So this is where we are today in aggregate. Now, granted, Heartland is way further along in this process, and their administrative capabilities, their clinical efficiencies, all of that. But we do have new businesses being formed every single day that are in that early innings land grab 1, 2, and 3, or innings 1, 2, and 3. But at aggregate, the industry sits somewhere in this. Where we're going is clinical efficiency, back office capabilities, and scaling and developing. That's organic growth capabilities within each one of these businesses. That's absolutely refined and a big muscle that they have that they're flexing on a regular basis. And by doing that, they require less mergers and acquisitions and EBITDA acquisition to grow because they've got mechanisms to grow that EBITDA organically. So I can go out and buy a business for 5x that doesn't actually look that good because I'm so confident that I could double it in size in a 4-year period. And that's a cheaper way to grow EBITDA than through acquisition. So then you've got specialty is coming on board. The concept of customer or patient experience is continuing to grow. And then you'll see that consolidation. It doesn't even get to that 100% that we talked about. This is what we're seeing a lot of. We're seeing new specialty groups being formed. As of 2015, there were virtually no specialty-specific DSOs that existed. And then in 2015, we saw the launch of 6 different oral surgery-specific groups, 3 endodontic-specific groups, and a myriad of multi-specialty concepts that existed out there. Again, these are really, really smart people coming from other industries, from private equity groups that have identified the direction of healthcare, the direction of dentistry, and drawing parallels to healthcare. And as such, they want to create more of an ecosystem by not just acquiring general dentistry businesses, but rather acquiring multi-specialty and creating multi-specialty platforms. And then on the right, opportunity for investors to continue to add value. This is where growth lives in a mature organization. It is not through M&A. So we know that the later you go into these innings, 7, 8, 9, there is multiple compression because these businesses have acquired the muscle to grow businesses organically, and they no longer need to pay premium multiples to grow. So we know that there's a correlation. If you do wait too long, you should absolutely expect multiples to go down. So that's the trade-off that we're trying to make sure that people understand as they're building a business to sell. Typical maturation of a healthcare services industry. So this is actually a marriage. I took the slide from a healthcare PowerPoint that I had reviewed and recreated it in the form for dentistry. So in the early stages, we talked about the land grab, early adopters. That's all 10 of those businesses on that first slide were early adopters, and they were 8 out of 10 of them grew through land grab, M&A acquisition, not through a de novo strategy. Now where we are today is you've got a lot of these mature groups that are beginning to create multi-specialty models and sub-verticals to add specialization so that they can grow the business that they have organically in addition to continuing with their M&A in order to keep pace with that 15 or 20% annual growth that they need. So it all started with general dentistry in the DSO space. Then it was shortly followed thereafter by pediatric. The reason that investors like general and pedo is because of the hygiene model, the recurring revenue model that exists. So they don't have to go out and source new patients every single time. So this is a less risky asset versus moving into dentistry by buying oral surgery. Oral surgery was the next group because it was sort of the closest thing to that, and the fact that most people do need their wisdom teeth out. So you've got this built-in patient base that you can tap in from just by the general dynamics of any given community or patient base in which you decide to acquire a business. But what we're actually starting to see now is you've got these legacy GP DSOs at the top, these legacy pediatric groups, and these oral surgery platforms that have been around since 2015. And now they're starting to add other specialties in there. They're GP businesses that are acquiring ortho practices. They're GP-centric businesses acquiring any and all specialties in the geographies where they have density, and they know that they can monetize that patient base and create a moat around an entire city because they now control, call it 70, 60% of the providers in that across all specialties of dentistry. So this is straight out of the playbook of healthcare. And then you've got other forms of specialization. We've seen a lot of all-on-4 centric businesses being formed lately. Mobile and on-site, we've seen a lot of different businesses try that model. Cosmetic has been around for a while, but now we're actually seeing DSOs want to lead with the idea of cosmetic dentistry. And then alternative countries, there's a publicly traded organization in Canada, Dental Corp of Canada. They're absolutely looking to move to the United States. Heartland Dental was once owned by the Ontario Teachers Pension Fund, so they're certainly familiar with that geography and would look to move to Canada. Mexico is absolutely an option as well for kind of the contiguous countries. And then digital first models. I spent a lot of time at Align Technology as a management consultant and found a lot of groups out there that are focused purely on aligner-based businesses. They saw the success that Smile Direct Club generated, or at least the demand in which Smile Direct Club generated, feel they can do it better, be doctor-directed, and they're building models that sort of straddle the line between a Smile Direct Club and a traditional ortho practice. But where we're going is platform consolidation is next. I've seen it a little bit. Heartland acquired like 150 locations with American Dental Partners, who Josh Swearingen from TUSK used to work at. This is the next phase. Once this multi-specialty begins to exist and there's regional density and these puzzle pieces fit together nicely, then there's going to be some large M&A transactions well above and beyond the traditional middle market things that we're seeing today. And we've already seen signals of that starting as recently as 3 years ago when the American Dental Partners deal happened. And then what you ultimately have is full service, large scale platforms. So if you look at Charlotte, for example, where I live, 10 years ago, there were 8 different health systems and probably hundreds and hundreds of individual solo practicing surgeons, doctors, you name it, even podiatrists. And now there are 2 major health systems and very, very, very few independently owned doctors or independently owned medical groups. So this is where we're going, but I think this is a really great look at where we're at today as well. Looking at this sort of a different way to get to where we're going to be. In the early years, Heartland and all the groups that were looking to acquire businesses would seek out geographies that they liked for various regions, urban density, et cetera, and the idea of Heartland. They were looking at sort of bedroom communities with large amounts of PPO. And then the second bullet under target market is underserved regions and shortage of providers. That's where Aspen was focused. They wanted to be in rural communities and seek out patients that don't generally go to the doctor, or excuse me, the dentist, unless they're in pain. So that was their business model. Contrast that with Heartland's. But then the next is, how do I mature? So I find this great location in Aspen's case in terms of a geography, and then I build out from there to create density. Or in Heartland's case, I find that mature business that has a big footprint and a great reputation in that region, and I grow it out. So either way, this image corresponds to both of them, but the idea is you start small and then you expand out from there, keeping geographic concentration. The next phase and where we are today is that densities begin to take form and service line expansion is now. So I've grown a big swath of practices. Well, the best way to continue to grow it is grow it organically. And the best way to do that is find nice little tuck-in businesses that complement the footprint that I'm in, build new businesses from scratch and allow me to develop that muscle. In early 2000s, Heartland started a de novo strategy. So they were 15 years into their existence, and they finally started doing a de novo strategy because they knew that their M&A would get them so far. They knew that their organic growth would get them so far, but they needed to develop a third muscle in order to keep pace with that 15% annual growth that they needed to generate. So adding cosmetic dentistry, adding oral surgery, adding endodontics, et cetera, and then creating a care coordination model where if I did acquire an endo practice that fits nicely in my greater GPs, well, are they actually referring to one another? Does that coordination exist? Because if it doesn't, then all of that was for nothing. But where the future is, it's full integration. So there are DSOs out there that already have this model in place. You've got general they started out as a GP-centric DSO. They went out and acquired oral surgeons. They started rotating orthodontists through their general dentistry practices. They got an endo practice and a perio practice, and now there's all this referral taking place. There are very few DSOs out there that are doing this, and the ones that are doing it are not even doing it right yet, but this is the direction that they are all going. We're actually starting to see DSOs being formed in this image. So they're actually from the beginning, from their inception, they're not looking for general dentistry only practices or oral surgery only practices. They're building a multi-specialty model from the beginning. They're just focused on certain geographies. They're focused on certain states. They're focused on other things that their market researchers have told them that are going to lead to ultimately this model thriving. How am I doing on time, George? Okay. Okay. So now I want to talk about micro trends. That's macro trends. That's where the business is in aggregate, where the industry is in aggregate, where the industry is going. Obviously, some of you here are here for TUSK's, our finger on the pulse. What's going on in M&A markets today? So I wanted to make sure I covered that. So we're going to break it into sell side and buy side. If I can get it to click. So on the sell side, this is going to come to no surprise to anybody in this room, but it's a tougher operating environment for folks that come to us or current clients that we have. You guys are operating living, breathing businesses, and the way that businesses are valued is on a trailing 12-month basis. And anytime we take a client to market, their trailing 12-month is what it is. Call it end of year 2022 if we're going to take you to market in 2023, early 2023. Well, getting that business prepared for sale, taking you to market, entertaining buyers, ultimately executing a letter of intent, there's a period of time that happens there that generally in this environment is unfavorable. There are headwinds that these businesses that we are representing are facing, and they are rearing their heads in the form of the EBITDA. So the EBITDA that we took to market is being eroded by greater economic conditions that are sometimes out of our client's control. So our job, Alex's team's job, is to make sure that we have a really firm pulse on where the business is that we're taking to market, where the vulnerability lives in that business, and when we take it to market, we're prepared to have that roll forward conversation, and we're communicating with our clients in real time the whole time to make sure, okay, well, is top line at least growing or stagnant? And we're really only focused on expenses that are going to be eating away at EBITDA. We're in constant communication to know where the businesses are. So that's that EBITDA margin compression that I just kind of talked about. We believe that in terms of there being less buyers, we believe that as many as 40% of the buyers are pencils down, and pencils started going down as of Q4 of last year. Now there's some people way smarter than me, the CEO of Morgan Stanley yesterday, saying that he believes that M&A at the very, very highest level has hit its bottom, and you should see activity pick up in the latter part of this year and certainly early part of next year. We hope that to be true. We're largely insulated here at the middle market level that TUSK operates. So although there haven't been a lot of mergers, between DSO to DSO or recapitalizations of DSOs to new private equity groups, in our space, that sub $5 million of EBITDA, those deals are still getting done, and they're largely getting done at historical type valuations, with some other tweaks that we'll cover next. So more disciplined approach from the buy side. They are being, tighter than ever with respect to the target acquisition profile that they have for their individual opportunities. Some groups, call us on a very, very regular basis, and they get very, very specific about what they want, and it's kind of like a wish list that we know will never get answered. They say, I want young doctors that are willing to stick around for 5 to 10 years, that are trending in the right direction, have zero Medicaid, operate in great communities, and are looking to only take 50% cash and 50% equity. It's like, well, I don't have a whole lot of those clients, but thank you for your call. Oh, and I only want to pay 6x on $2 million of EBITDA. But this is the way that buyers are approaching us, and they're being very disciplined. What that ultimately means for TUSK is that we need to go broader than ever. We've always prided ourselves on going wider than anybody to get the buyer pool for each and every one of our clients. But it is certainly requiring a whole lot more effort to find new buyers, to vet new buyers that were not active before or perhaps didn't even exist 6 months ago, to replace those old legacy DSOs that are typically really great buyers, pay premium multiples, have very favorable structures and relatively low risk options for our clients that are just completely pencils down. So the more disciplined approach has just required more work from us. And then you're seeing more risk sharing in the deals. So the structures of the deals have had material changes. If a business used to be 80% cash at close, 20% rolled equity, now they're leading with 70-30. If it was a 70-30, they're leaving with 60-40. And by the way, some of that cash they want to put in the form of a seller note, because the cost of capital and debt markets, because of the cost of debt has gone up, they don't want to put as much leverage on the business, so they're passing that risk sharing along to their clients, and they're asking them to bear some of the risk and ultimately seller finance some of this so that they can ultimately only produce maybe 50% cash at close. Now, these are structures that they're leading with for the assets that they absolutely want. They're changing, they're adjusting, they're getting to a more historical type approach and something back towards the norm. And for TUSK, because we go as broadly as we do, there are always at least 2 or 3 that stand, head and shoulders above all the other offers that are on the table. We've never seen a wider variance of enterprise value and variance of deal structure than we do today. So we have to go broadly to make sure that we can deliver on the projected valuations and deal structures that we prepared our clients for when we took them to market. Movement towards multi-specialty. This is coming in multiple forms. So there are specialty-specific DSOs being formed. So in 2015, there were a handful of oral surgery-centric DSOs, a handful of endo-centric DSOs. What's really interesting is, 2 or 3 years into their life cycle, they began calling us saying, well, we're actually changing our name from US Endo Partners to Specialized Dentistry, or Specialized Dentistry, which means, okay, you didn't believe in the strategy that you came to market with, and you're recognizing that the multi-specialty approach is where dentistry is going. And when you need to recapitalize in 3 years, the market's going to reward you for being a multi-specialty platform versus being an endo-specific or an oral surgery-specific platform. Additionally, there are these general dentistry-specific DSOs that have now said they're prioritizing specialty businesses in markets where they have that geographic density. So going back to that, the slide that shows all the different ecosystem slide, that's what's happening in those legacy DSOs that have geographic density, and they can capitalize on that through great patient coordination and adding of specialty. So all of you, I want to make sure you walk away with knowing how you can benefit from the current M&A trends and where multi-specialty movement is ultimately going in dentistry. So skate where the puck is going. I love that analogy. Most of you do have time on your side. Some of you are years away from getting a deal done, and some of you are not. You do not necessarily need to build your business in this multi-specialty model in order to benefit from what's going on in the marketplace today. But it is important that you understand where your business is today and ultimately label yourself. Is my business an anchor business where I can partner with somebody and I've got the pathway and storytelling that I can lead them to how they can grow my business or grow the region with me as the centerpiece? Or am I an add-on platform, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but just understanding what you are so that we can articulate your value proposition on your behalf when we're in market. Or am I a platform business? And if I'm a platform business, what levers do I want to pull between now and the time that I go to market that will ultimately maximize the valuation that I'm able to achieve? And if you can make those strategic decisions, make sure you're doing it understanding where dentistry is going. But don't take drastic changes. It's not required that if you're a GP, if you have 5 general dentistry locations today, I'm not telling you to go out and acquire endo practices or perio practices. But you could, however, start rotating a specialist through there, which is a model that a lot of folks have always tried to do, but I don't know if they did it because it was going to generate incremental EBITDA quickly, or whether it was because it's the model in which patients want to consume dentistry, which is as much of it under one roof as possible, and actually able to maximize and benefit from that coordination of care. And then give yourself time to find the right fit for partnership. We can't stress this enough. Obviously, at the front end, understand what your number is that you need in order to pursue going to market for you and your family to achieve financial independence. But more importantly for TUSK, we need to go broad now more than ever. And the longer we have, we'll run a very efficient process. And just because we're going very, very broad does not add exponential amount of time to the process. It just is more work during the process. But that being said, we want you to make sure that you see the entire spectrum of the marketplace that exists. I mentioned, being an add-on isn't necessarily a bad thing. The add-on practices are actually the ones that have been receiving the highest multiples because we know where dentistry is going. We know what these DSOs are trying to build. And we had a perio practice that was less than $700,000 of EBITDA receive a double-digit multiple, all because they were the right puzzle piece for the right DSO, and they were a perio practice in the middle of a footprint of a largely oral surgery specific group. Now, that offer was 3 times more than any other offer that was on the table, so it was a pretty clear opportunity for our client. But the interesting part was that was a buyer we have not done a deal with in the entirety of TUSK's history. But they were a very active group in the DSO space. But because we go to the well every single time and we find every single buyer that is available, we were able to achieve this really exponential outcome for our client that they were not prepared for, and quite frankly, we weren't even prepared for. But all of these are signals to us that all of the modeling and projections that I reviewed from the parallels of hospital are starting to take root rather quickly. Every business is unique. Each one of you in this room are unique. And it's important that you give us the appropriate amount of time to find the right fit and partner for you. So with that, I want to thank you all for your time today. I greatly appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to introducing my colleagues, Josh Swearingen and Maggie Jarrett. Thank you.